Hey everyone, this is Andy and today I want to show you how to paint this orc skin. I'm a big fan of the game Warhammer Underworlds, so when this warband came out, I knew it would be great for the channel. You could use this tutorial to paint your Age of Sigmar Orruks, your 40k Orcs, and there's loads of orcs that different companies make. I also hope there's some great tips that can help in painting any organic volume like the muscles presented here. So I want to show you the colours I'm going to use today. I've decided to use Vallejo model colour, and I've chosen these over Citadel because I really like the way they layer, and so I think it takes fewer layers to get nice coverage, especially this olive green. I'm going to do some shading with the black green and highlight with lime green, and if I need to, add a little ivory for the brightest kind of highlights. If you've never tried anything other than Citadel, I encourage you to try some other paint brands. I'm going to use a size 1 Artis Opus brush for this, and then in some of the really fine details I'll probably use a 00. On the palette I have 2 blobs of the olive green, which is the main colour, and I have a little bit of the black green. So what I'm going to do is make my darkest shadow colour by adding a little bit of this black green into the olive green. The olive green is going to form the mid-tone, so if I just darken it a little bit, it'll make the ideal base coat, and it won't be too dark. I'm making a mix because olive green is my ideal mid-tone, and so all I need to do is darken it a little bit. I also know that it has fantastic coverage properties, so that's why it's worth making a mix. Sometimes you might find a go-to paint that you really love, and it just needs some slight adjustment instead of picking a whole new pot of paint. So we're going to start our base coat now, and I've loaded the brush up with not too much paint so it's not going to flow excessively into the recesses. Now I really think to get a nice looking skin it's worth spending a long time on the base coat. If we get a really smooth and solid base coat, it's going to make it really easy to add the additional highlights after. So you can see this first coat isn't doing too much at all. And now we're going to add another coat. Again, I'm being smooth and careful with this. I'm not just slapping it on. I'm trying to do nice smooth brush strokes, making sure the paint isn't puddling in one particular recess or area, and just trying to get that really nice foundation. The skin is the most important part, so I feel like this is where I want to spend the time. In the end, I managed to get a perfect base coat with 3 coats. Now some of the details, like round the face, need some definition, so I'm going to make a wash out of the black green by just adding some water. I'm just going to add this wash fairly carefully, just in the areas I need that extra shading. For parts like the muscles, it doesn't actually need a darker shade, so I don't need to put it in those parts. Just areas like these fingers here. Now we're going to do our first highlight, and that's going to be with pure olive green. What I'm going to do here, as you can see, is dilute it so it's pretty translucent. That's going to allow me to build up the layers gradually and get a smooth transition from our base tone. Okay, so now let's begin our first highlight. And I make sure I don't have too much loaded onto the brush. And I'm just running it carefully along the muscles, pushing the pigment into where I want the highlight to be. Now I'm starting on the bicep and I'm painting a nice rounded shape. There's no edges here, so we don't need an edge highlight. We need to paint a highlight shape that follows the flow of the muscles. If we imagine a light source, the highlight should be where it's perpendicular to that light source. So you'll actually notice these highlights are going right up against the recess of the other muscles. And that's because they turn up into the light, and that's where our brightest highlight should go. So the next colour we're going to use is the lime green. It's a really nice green to use, it's fairly bright, so what I'm going to do is add it into the olive green as an incremental step. Okay, so we're kind of repeating the previous stage, but we're obviously going to be painting a smaller area to build up the highlights. So again, I'm following the flow of the muscles and trying to push that pigment into the top of the recess. Now I'm going to start detailing the face. So I'm trying to be as sharp as I can and picking out all those individual details like the nose and the brows. I'm also going to add some highlights to the large area on the flat spot of the head because that's going to receive a lot of light, so we don't want to leave that the darker green. Once we're happy that we've built that up, I'm going to move to pure lime green. And now we're going to start adding much finer highlights. So we're not really going to cover really large areas like the top of the head. I'm moving on to more picking out the details. It's quite a bright green, so we're going to use it sparingly. Alternatively, if you want a less saturated green, you could have started adding ivory, which means it will be not as bright. I do add an area highlight to the head, but this time it's much smaller. Just doing a highlight where I think the light is going to face it. Now we're moving on to brighter highlights, and I start to add little tiny bits of ivory. This is going to make sure the green isn't too bright and vibrant and a little more natural looking. So now I'm being really sparing, as you can see on the bicep, and I'm just adding quite small highlights. But this is going to give it that pop and that interest, especially on the table. This is the same highlight mix, I'm just showing you how I pick out the details on the face. And now I'm using my 2-0 brush, trying to be as fine as possible. But picking out these little lights really makes a huge difference. You can see that's looking pretty cool now, and what I'm going to do is add a little more ivory into the mix until I'm happy with the level of contrast. And you can adjust this yourself according to the taste of the contrast you like, and also how much time you want to spend on these. Really happy with how the bicep's looking there, with a nice sort of shiny light on it. So what I'm going to do is add something to match on that point on the forehead where I think it's going to draw all the attention. That's looking pretty cool now. So I'm waiting for the layers to dry, and then I'm just building up those highlights really carefully now. Now I add some final detail highlights around those eyes, and you can see these are really tiny, but they add so much definition. And that's actually the entire process now. You can push the light as much as you want, keep adding ivory until you get a lot of contrast, and of course, if you're painting it for tabletop, maybe you can reduce some of these stages. But I hope you like the result. Obviously, I've only shown you on the face and the arm, but it's the same throughout the rest of the miniature. You can also explore adding in some skin colour to parts like the elbow, different tones for the lips, but I've kept it nice and simple here. But I hope you can see we've got a nice bright green with lots of directional light, and it looks really cool. I'm going to carry on using this method and paint the rest of my warband. If you use this recipe and technique to paint any of your orcs, then please tag us in them. It'd be awesome to see how this colour looks on your army. If you liked the video, then hit like, and if you want to see more tutorials from us, then please subscribe. Until next time, see you then.